blue, the red, it's kind of hard to miss us on the battlefield. It's good because the battlefield gets very smoky, so you want to be able to see the drummers, because an officer would need to come to tell us what to tell the soldiers to do. So I mean, he'd have to tell us when we wanted us to play retreat, to advance, charge, things like this. Now, seeing that we are kind of wearing a very bright uniform, we'd be a big target, right? Not back then. Back then they fought what was called a gentleman's war, which means you do not shoot off communications on either side. So we were generally safer in the battle, not always completely safe, but generally much more safe than the common soldiers. So we had a pretty nice shape. You know, we got the snazzy uniforms, you know, we got a better pay, and we also generally did not get shot off in the battle.
Alright, our second use would be for marching. As you can notice, this is a very hot and not very comfortable day. Add about 12 pounds of wool and you are not a happy soldier. These shoes were not made by Dr. Scholl, so you can imagine having to walk from, say, here to Albany is not going to be very fun. So, as musicians, we were used to play like folk tunes that all the soldiers would know and could sing along with, kind of like the modern iPod, to kind of get your mind off of how uncomfortable your feet were, how sweaty you were, how cold, how hot, whatever. So we were used to help motivate them. And we're going to play for you a medley today. British Grenadiers to Yankee Doodle.
Ready?
Stop.
B.
These songs were kind of like a sing-song. One man would sing one line and the rest of his group would sing it back to him, and then there would be a shared chorus. And as they went along, they would make up lyrics. And you can imagine these lyrics, being soldiers, got to be very interesting, very G-rated. Another piece we're going to play for you is Brandywine. It means it's kind of like wine, sort of. That's the name they would use for wine. Okay, Brandywine. It's hot.
Ready? Beat.
marching and rowing to and fro. Because you can imagine that if you're in a canoe and you row at two different tempos, you're not going to get where you want to go in the time that you wanted to. And also marching, it makes your soldiers look good if they're all on the same foot and they're all going the same speed.
So let's talk a little tiny bit more about the uniforms. You can see the hats that we have. Again, they actually are made of bear. And again, we were all about being loud and being visually, able to spot closely. So the hats, again, gave us a higher point to be able to see us better. The other thing that we have that's interesting about our uniforms are what's on our feet. They're the gaiters. And if you ever see French ones, they go all the way up to the knees. These are ankle gaiters that the British had. They protected your shoes because, again, like Susanna said, they had a long way to march. They could be marching from here to Syracuse, here to Albany. Their shoes go, obviously they're not walking to Walmart's to get a new pair. Their uniforms generally got replaced from Europe about once a year, and not overly reliably. Ships sunk, and there were sticky-fingered merchants along the way, and so uniforms sometimes didn't even get here, especially here at the far edge of the frontier. So while you can not easily, but you can sew up or patch the cloth parts of your uniform, not so much with the shoes. So they wore the gaiters to protect the shoes and to keep the stones and the mud and the sticks and everything away from them. Okay, so we've given you two purposes for field music. One is for marching. One is duty calls or signaling. The third main purpose of the field music was for ceremonial music. And this is one of those traditions that's passed down today. In modern armies, obviously, they're not marching from here to there and playing and singing. They're not still using the bison drums as signaling, but military music still plays for ceremonial purposes, especially in the forms of anthems. So back then, they had the folk songs. It often had somewhat off-color lyrics, or the lyrics were constantly made up for. Ceremonial pieces of music were a little longer, a little more musically intricate, and they were used to convey a little bit more solemn and important of an occasion. So we're going to play an anthem from the time period, God Save the King. A lot of you may recognize the tune, and it's a good example of another concept in 18th century music. As we were saying, they didn't have iPods, they didn't have CDs. Music wasn't codified the way it is today. Back then, they would have a tune in their heads, and they might have brought that tune out here to the frontier, and they would make up new words for it all the time. So God Save the King is one of those pieces where the British had a set of lyrics, the Americans made up their own set of lyrics. You heard a version of Yankee Doodle earlier. Probably some of it was familiar to you and some of it wasn't. Again, we played a version that started in 1770. It's a piece, they're passing it along, they're teaching it from person to person. It got changed a little bit over time. And again, there were British and American versions of that song. It's actually one of the few songs we have documented that the British and the Americans were both playing it at the same time in the battlefield at the Battle of Bunker Hill in Boston. So here's God Save the King, and you can think whatever lyrics you like.
Make up your own words.
Attention. Ready? Beat. For a regimental field music group in a European army. One was signaling to the troops, one was marching, and one was ceremonial purposes. Is there a common use for music I haven't mentioned that anybody can think about?
Morale.
Morale? I'll say morale. I'll move on that. Morale or entertainment. That's a good one. Typically instruments are used for dancing or sing-alongs. Field music in a European army was not typically used for those purposes. These instruments, they're very shrill, they're very loud. We can we can say that we were hearing them last night from Fort George when they were playing. So not so great sometimes indoors. And typically a European army would have what's called a regimental band, where the commander out of his own pocket would fund musicians and fund instruments, and they would have a little bit more melodic, nicer sounding group of musicians who would play music for dancing or for singing along. However, having said that, we're not in the middle of Paris or London or Europe. Musicians, instruments were not readily available. We are so at the frontier in the 1700s and in the 1770s. So we imagine that the fifes and drums were likely used some for entertainment back in that time period as here. But typically in an 18th century European army, that was not the purpose of what we're portraying, which is the regimental field music. So that concludes our demonstration. Any questions from anybody?